All those things and so much more. Just grab a seat in the chair or the floor. Sit back, relax, recline. While she drops another casual line. You're tuned into Casually Molly with Molly and Bergie.
Welcome back to the Casually Molly podcast, everybody. Again, I am your host, Molly Ambergy. Unless you're new to the podcast, welcome. Happy to have you. We use our platform right here in St. Louis, Missouri to highlight very talented artists, musicians, entertainers. I mean, just anybody willing to casually have a discussion with me. And today I am very happy to be casually joined. She is an award-winning singer, songwriter. Crowd, get ready. It is Angela Soffe. Woo! Oh, thanks for tuning in. Angela, why don't you tell us a little bit, where are you joining us from right now? We're via virtually on this interview.
Thank you so much for having me, Molly. I am so happy to be here. I live a couple of hours from Seattle on the backside of Mount Rainier, if you know where that is.
Yes, I'm familiar with Seattle. And then I've heard of the city that you mentioned just now. What brought you to, are you from that area or?
No, and it's a very long story. You probably don't want to hear how I got here. but the point is, I moved here about 6-7 years ago when my husband got a job, his first job out of grad school.
Okay.
And this hospital system that he was working at had a loan repayment program that never actually ended up happening. But we came, starry-eyed, hoping we would get our loans forgiven. And we just stayed.
And they just stayed.
So,
awesome.
just stayed.
And I'm happy to have you. I've never been to that part of the country, but now I'm interested in seeing it. Anything that you would highlight from that area? I know Seattle is obviously a pretty well-known city. Anything that we should know?
Yes, definitely should know that. So the city I live in is known for growing all the apples, like all the apples.
Okay.
I know more about apples than I ever thought I wanted to know. Apples and hops. You know hops that go in, that they put in beer?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is the hop capital of the world.
Oh,
so we have a big hop festival every fall. We just had it actually in October. You should come up and celebrate. We make hop crowns.
Okay.
Everyone gets drunk. It's really great. And it's like a little Oktoberfest, big Oktoberfest.
Oh, yeah. I love that. Because I have an Oktoberfest I just moved to for people in Missouri. It's an area called St. Charles, Missouri. And I'm right near Main Street where it's all happening and whatnot. And they have an Oktoberfest there as well. We have one in downtown St. Louis and Cincinnati, Ohio, where I grew up. We have one. So now I just got to check this one off my list, get some apples, get some hops. I'm going to come starry-eyed, but just for maybe a different reason. So I can't wait.
Yes.
But why don't you tell us, thank you for telling us that. That's another fun way to get to know you. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your background story and how you got into being an artist and a musician?
All right. Well, I grew up in Asia, in the Philippines, and my mom, at a young age, just had this, passion that one of her kids would play music.
Yes.
And I think like all moms do, like, oh, one of my kids is going to do this. Mm-hmm. So she put me in piano really early on and I loved it. And so I just grew up playing classical piano, competing against all the super Asians that were so good.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of competition and I never really sang a whole lot. I mean, I did in choirs, but it was definitely like music theory focused. And it wasn't until I got to college that I saw people playing folk music, like American music. It was my first time living in the United States, and I was 18. And so I hadn't really heard about Dolly Parton or like any of the country stars. I didn't really know much about it. And I joined a folk band and we toured all through college. And that's really where like my love of country and the whole umbrella of Americana music really just sank in. I think it was like genetic or something.
Yes. Because
I just loved it and started writing And then I played in a bunch of bands just really casually. I'm going to have to use that word like over and over again.
Yes,
casually.
Absolutely. Get it. I love it. Yes.
So casually I was writing songs and playing in bands and then it wasn't until I actually started having kids that I was like, oh man, like if I don't start making some of my own records, like I'm just going to run out of time. I'm going to be super busy mom. And so it was actually when I started having kids that I started releasing solo records and taking it a little more seriously. I realized I would have to do them in tandem. I couldn't just like wait for one thing to finish. So so that's kind of, very briefly how it all started.
Well, no, I think that's fantastic. First of all, I love that you grew up in the Philippines. I think that's actually a really interesting topic to bring up, just because I wanted to know, how did you feel transferring, culturally? You grew up in a different culture. I've heard nothing but good things about the Philippines, and I meet a lot of amazing people who are from that part of the country. What was it like transferring from that part of the world and coming to the U.S.?
Yeah, it was insane. I mean, it was really mind.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I landed on the moon. And mostly I think because I assumed that because the United States was my culture, that I would somehow magically fit in because I'm American. My mom actually is from Argentina, so I'm half, but
oh wow.
I just thought that I would somehow blend right in.
Right.
And I didn't, from everything from the way I spoke to the things that I talked about to dating to even how close I stood to someone. I mean, all of those things were totally different culturally. And I didn't really get any of the jokes. I didn't know any of the TV shows. So it was really a challenge. But, like anything, you figure it out, you fake it until you can finally, find your people or find your way. So it was really difficult. I got strep throat. I got a whole bunch of illnesses that I think you wouldn't normally get, but because I wasn't exposed to them as a child, my immune system was just totally different. So I was really sick for a couple of years, adjusting to the American way of life, the food, everything.
Mm-hmm. So, I can relate to that because even though first of all, I grew up in America and I still feel like I don't fit in sometimes, even now. So, you're totally fine. I'm always like, do I belong here? Do I belong at all? What's going on? But I went to Italy. I went to a small town called Ascoli Piceno and I lived there for 3 months and I was studying and doing all of that. When I came back after like having all this, like just a different culture, different environment, different food, different everything, I had food poisoning 3 times. Like I couldn't have fast food the way I used to. I couldn't eat the way I used to. So it really just changed my whole dietary journey, not even like something I was choosing. It's just my body wasn't used to that anymore. So I totally, I get where you're coming from for sure. But speaking of, being here, we're very happy to have you just because I was saying earlier, you are a very talented artist. I've been listening to your work recently, obviously prepping for our discussion today. Speaking of the albums that you were talking about, you had a album that was kind of you said on your website, it said an independent move out of the quiet of personal darkness. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that album and what you meant by that description?
So I wrote that record after about 10 years of silence. I actually stopped making music while I was having kids and a lot of other things were going on, but it was at a time when I realized that the religion of my childhood was no longer a good fit. I was raised in a very Orthodox Mormon family.
Oh, wow.
And, we go generations back, polygamists on both sides. And my family is not currently, practicing polygamy, but it's just very deep seated in my culture and in my family. And so to make that decision was just so heartbreaking. And to watch my family suffering over my decision was just, I think it was more like psychologically, I went through so much stress.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't until like that happened that I picked up my guitar after many years away. I wasn't playing at all. And I decided to start writing. I mean, I didn't even think about it. I just started writing kind of like as a journal entry, writing songs and venting. And all these songs just came pouring out, like so many, like dozens of songs. And I realized that there were other people that were suffering too or struggling. And I was like, this might help someone. So I released it as a record, and it ended up being something that people related to. And I know it's very niched out, like how many people are there that leave a religion and feel the same way. But it turned out that there were a lot of people that for whatever reason, like felt like they could no longer belong to something. And they felt like they were on the outside, wishing they could be back on the inside and unknow what they know, but they can't. And so it was a really pivotal time in my life. And releasing that record felt really cathartic, but also very like exposing, if that makes sense. Like I felt like I was just laying it all out for everyone to see. Because I'd been kind of private, I mean, I've always been kind of a private person, but I just hadn't shared. Like when you write a song, it really feels like a journal entry just for other people to read.
Yes.
And listen to, like as much as they want. And so it's a very vulnerable act, I think, to release music that's like comes from that deep place. So yeah, I mean, it was really healing to do that, but also like really scary. And it was a dark time. But it's helped a lot of people. So I'm glad that I did it.
Well, I'm vulnerable. That's the word I was thinking of when you were talking about that, just because I don't think people realize when you are writing something, especially about such a pivotal time in your life, there is that exposure and kind of, when you're writing something, it's like, will people like it? Will people understand it? Will people relate to it? And then you don't want to be a fraud. Obviously, you're just like, oh, what if you sometimes question, what am I doing? And I feel like you hit a great point about just kind of that fear of unknown and what's going to happen. But I feel like it was called Second Wind. Am I correct on that? That was the name of the, you got your second wind. You went to this new chapter of life. And then didn't it win a nomination? Is that correct? Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I was totally surprised because here I was, mommy with diapers, like making this record that it just felt like this thing I had to do. And then, one of the singles on there is called Rocks. And that one won the Great American Songwriting Contest or something like that. And then the record itself won the nomination for Americana Record of the Year by the Independent Music Awards, which was like, I mean, it was up there with Mipso and some of the big bands. I was like, what?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was such an honor. I couldn't go to the award ceremony, but in New York, which I wanted to go to, but I was just, it felt like vindication, like, okay, like this is a good thing that I did. And I may have, ruffled some feathers in the process, but I think, in the end, the truth needs to be shared.
Absolutely. And I feel like, again, that's why people can relate to it, because it is the truth. I feel like sometimes when you share your truth, it's just like you mentioned, a lot of people have that same truth. They just don't know who to share it with or how to share it with, which I had mentioned earlier before we started recording. I really appreciate people who are musicians and artists, obviously, because the talent and the way that they're able to portray their story through it. But I love being introduced to new concepts and new ideas in maybe a different way that I had never seen it before, which, speaking of, I was talking about like bands and things I learned by watching them. You have a 4-piece band. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do. I have a great band. So I've got these, they're so awesome. So my band's in Seattle, and I'm smiling because the whole time during COVID, we tried to get on the bandwagon of doing those virtual, like where you're all these boxes and you're all playing at the same time. And we did one of those, and it was like so much work. We were like, never mind. We're just going to wait until this whole thing blows over. So we actually just had our first gig in like 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Last month. And it was like no time had passed. It was just a rocking out the door, awesome show. And yeah, I mean, they're great. I play with them whenever there's, some event or like a festival or whatever. Cause as musicians, we wear all these different hats. So I'm producing and I'm songwriting and I'm singing on this and then, playing with the band. And so, yeah, they're super talented. I'm so lucky to have them.
Oh, that's it. And I understand that. And just always wearing hats, but that's how it works. That's how you hustle in this industry for sure. I always am curious, what goes into, like, how do you kind of choose, who's going to play what? How do you just put a band together? I guess that's like the easiest way to ask this question. It might sound naive, but I've never put one together before. So how do you go about that? Do you just like reach out and contact people? How does this work?
Well, I can't speak for everyone because I don't know how.
Okay.
I mean, you should probably ask like a lot of people this question because I don't really know. This is my experience though, is when I moved to town, I was like, I'd like to start playing again. It had been so long, like literally 10 years. And I couldn't really find anyone in town. And so I was like, I'll just look outside. So I found another band actually. And there was a guy who played mandolin really well. And I was like, okay, well, I know I can use a mandolin player. I mean, he and I could duo or something.
Cool.
So I reached out and I kind of borrowed him from another band. And then we started gigging and then, we added a bass player and he wanted to join and then a drummer. And so I don't know. I mean,
it just all came together.
Together. Yeah. I mean, it's been, people have come and gone depending, like we used to have a fiddler and we still use him when we need to, but it's just, I don't know. There's like a synergy and kind of when you get to know people, you're like, okay, I think let's jam. There's a lot of time, like people get together for jams and they're like, hey, we should play this gig together. You play it. And then you're like, oh, we should do another one. Yes. So it's kind of organic. I wouldn't say it's not like online dating where it's like a computer program.
Right. Yes. But that's the best way to do it. I feel like sometimes the best connections I've made with people have been just like organically, like even just for this episode, it was like, you should interview this person. I was like, okay, sounds good. But it was organic. I wasn't even searching. I'm like, sure, Angela sounds great. Her music is great. I keep bringing this up because everybody should look it up. Now, I had looked up, speaking of looking things up, when I was reading about you, you also produced a record in the pandemic. Am I wrong on that?
I did.
How did that go? Speaking of like being in the squares, did you do anything in the squares as well on Zoom, or were you just kind of like, what was going on in your mind while we were all on lockdown and you're writing all this music?
Well, I had written a bunch of music before the pandemic ever happened. And I had connected with a producer in Nashville that I knew I wanted to work with. Like there was this like organic sort of chemistry with her. And so we had these plans and then COVID happened. Yeah. So then we paused. So actually it was like halfway through the pandemic that, when flights were like sort of like starting up again, but no one was flying.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's when I was flying. So I went to Nashville like 4 or 5 times during the pandemic.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And just cranked out this record. And it actually ended up being so awesome because all the musicians that are supposed to be like out on tour normally, like the amazing ones that are always snatched up by big artists, they were all home. And so they could just play on my record and it was super cool. So I was hanging out with, unbelievable talent. And so we finished this record in May and it's coming out in the spring.
Oh, wow. Well, congratulations. That's super exciting.
Thank you.
I love that you had like a private jet basically to all your times in Nashville. Sounds good. I love that though. I love it. I think that's great that you were able to utilize tools. I especially like what I talk about with other comedians too. They went through a lot of that as well. Like, do we do Zoom shows? How does this work? But, kind of creating something or not kind of creating something, even under certain circumstances. Obviously, I'm sure you're writing stuff all the time, but I do love the idea that you collaborate with other artists and whatnot, which brings me to my next question. Is there like a favorite artist that you've worked with or that you enjoy collaborating with? I was like, not to call somebody out, but
yeah. Oh man. I feel like there's so many different genres that I work in. And then also, there's so much talent in so many different ways. I admire so many artists that I've actually never even met that I feel like have influenced my music in like really profound ways. But some of my favorite people working with have been producers and other songwriters that have real hearts and real stories, and like they show up with so much vulnerability, like in a writing room. And they're so gifted and so talented. I mean, I don't even know if anyone would know their names, but to me, like the people who are willing to like share what's really like on their hearts and on their minds, like you make a good song when you do that, when you're real with each other. So yeah, sorry that I probably just beat around the bush explaining that, but
no, absolutely. I think that's I was just talking with someone the other day who I had interviewed on this podcast, and I asked something a little bit similar to him, like, who do you admire? Who do you like working with? And he didn't even mention a national headliner. He's like, when you first start out in a career, like, you're in music and whatnot, it's just like what you said, you have people who influence you, but who your favorite people usually become are the people who work side by side with you and do have that heart and, humility and vulnerability, just so that way it's just like how you mentioned, having that organic connection. So I really appreciate, that was a very humble and very lovely answer. So thank you very much for sharing that. That was beautiful. But speaking of beautiful, you showed me in the background, you have 3 beautiful children. I know that you had mentioned that your mom was like, okay, you're going to play music, you're going to do all this stuff regarding, the music platform and path. Do your kids have that same kind of interest, or is it kind of just, mom's doing music and we'll just keep it there?
Well, have you ever read the book Tiger Mom?
No, but tell me about it. I want to look at it.
Well, it's about Asian moms.
Oh, okay.
And how they like really make their kids become little geniuses, right? And I feel like I have a little bit of that. I make my kids do music.
Okay.
Not all of them. Like I have enforced it with all of them, but I can tell and I've taught music too. So I feel like you can kind of tell when something feels good to a kid and they like it and there's like energy there. And when it's like, oh my gosh, like I hate every second of this. So my daughter plays fiddle. She plays violin, my middle child. So, and she's really great, but it's been a lot of tears, a lot of like making her do it.
That's okay. I understand. My mom put me in piano, and I'm sure there were many times where I probably wasn't the most well-behaved child, but now I can read music. So once she hits 31, because that's where I'm at, she'll appreciate it. So don't worry, it'll just be a minute. But do your other kids play the fiddle as well, or any other instruments, or?
No, trombone and piano.
Oh, wow. So you basically have a 3-piece band in your own house.
Yeah. I had this dream of having like a folk band, but then my son wanted to play trombone. I was like, that is not a string instrument. Pick something else. Is that terrible? No, it's fine. It's fine. So he plays trombone. It's okay. I'm over it. But he's really good. And I'm just happy they're playing something. So yeah.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I love that. Does your husband play as well? Does he have an instrument too?
He does. He's one of those like play by ear kind. Never really studied, but he can pick up a guitar and a piano and just play. I know it's kind of gross.
Oh my
I don't know
God.
how he does that.
How does he do that? I am always so jealous of people who can do that. I think that's amazing. I'm like, I have to like read and study and, repetition. And I'm like, I love that you can just sit there and be like, Oh my gosh. Well, see, you got a whole family band. So, if the Angela Soffe band doesn't work out, you've got the family folklore. Yeah. Plus the trombone. So there you go. It works
Yes.
out. I love it. I love it. So how does it feel like for them to see you? Do they get to come to your gigs at all sometimes or join you on the road?
They do. They do come. It's hard for me. I'm just going to be honest. It has been historically hard for me to be mom and musician because like they're literally on the front row, like, mommy, 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 she pushed me. Like, like, mommy, I have to go to the bathroom. Like so that hasn't worked too well. So typically I try to keep those separate. But they're a little older now. I think they could handle it,
Yeah.
I think they can. It's when we have like really casual outdoor, barbecue concert type things that they want to be right up front and talk to me while we're playing. So, but yeah, absolutely. I love having them, to be honest. I mean, it's fun. And I think it's important. And maybe this is what your question's getting at, but I feel like it's important for your kids to see you making time for the things that matter to you because it gives them the permission someday to do the same thing and not have that mom guilt that gets passed down generations deep that, you can't you have to just, do one thing. You can't branch out or you can't make time for your own things. So I want them to see that so that they can do that for themselves too.
Absolutely. And I was going to be my next question. So thank you, because I feel like a lot of times that's that general question, right? Where people are like, how do you balance it? How do you do it all? And I love the way you phrased it, where you were just like, I want them to see, what I'm doing. So that way, when they get older and they want to follow their dreams and whatnot, they could pass that on to a possible legacy. So I think you're really setting a great tone. So I really respect that about you. What I'll ask you too, speaking of setting a tone, what projects should we expect from you moving forward? Are you I know you're probably writing all the time, but are there any other albums in the works? Are there shows that are happening that we should know about? Why don't you tell us a little bit about the future Angela projects?
I love it. Well, this record, number 1, is coming out probably, February, March, April. I'm not really sure. It just kind of depends on so many things. So that definitely. And if people want to pre-order, they can go to my website, angelasoffe.com, or follow, Instagram, whatever, and pre-order that record. And then I am doing like production work myself. So I produce folk things, some pop stuff, but I'm working on some Christmas stuff right now. And
okay.
Yeah.
I love Christmas
cool.
stuff. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So I'm doing, covers of public domain Christmas songs. They're usually commissioned by different clients, but I do, custom songwriting for people. And making music is my favorite thing to do. So I'm doing that, and releasing probably another music video coming out. I'm not sure about the timeline, but yeah.
That's okay. I mean, that's what I love. We can also follow you. If you've been watching on YouTube, Angela's, perfect. It's like we have a tech team that is on this or something. Your handle has been popping up through this.
I love it.
Angela Soffe Music, just point on down. Absolutely. Your music videos are super well done, though. Do you have do you produce them on your own? Do you have other people that direct them? What goes into making your music videos? They're absolutely gorgeous. I love all the settings in them too.
Oh, thank you. That warms my heart. Yeah. So I art directed this last one that I did, and discovered that I don't know, in another life, I should do filmmaking because I love it too.
Yes.
I love too many things. So that one was really fun. It was shot at a farmhouse here in Yakima. And I mean, it's a lot of work to prep it and get all the cast and the people. But if you know what you want, the vision, and you have the right people, I had an amazing videographer, and he and I just pumped out the whole thing, and it was super fun. You just get the shots that you need, and that music video was really funny because I had an allergic reaction to my eyelash extensions.
What?
That day.
Oh no, what happened?
So my eyes were like turtles. They were so big and I couldn't open them. And I was like, oh my gosh, like there's no way I'm filming myself today. So we just filmed all the other people and I waited for my face to
die down. Yeah.
Stop exploding. It was really bad. It was kind of funny. I was paying for my vanity, but whatever.
Oh, that's right. It's the challenge of the entertainment industry. So I just laughed.
I was like, I know this. Like, if you're a bride, you don't go get tanning like the day before. Like, why would you go get eyelash extensions 2 days before a video shoot? I don't know. Who thinks of that?
Here's the thing. I've seen so many people with beautiful eyelashes that do get extensions.
Right?
And I'm like, maybe I should try one. But I guess I will and if someday I produce a music video, I'm going to remember this story. I'm going to be like, listen, or before I film anything, direct anything, I'm going to be like, let me just give myself a week or two and then keep them in here. But I'm sorry that happened. I love it. I love that you made it. That's fantastic. But I love that you are also, I love obviously that you are strong enough to get through a story like that. But I also love that you're directing and producing and whatnot. It just goes into the many hats in the entertainment industry. Another thing I'll ask you you've given a lot of great points through this as well. But other than advice on eyelash extensions, which we all needed, so I appreciate it. We all needed to know. You are a woman in the music industry. And sometimes with music, a lot of times, you hear through different stories or just even when I watched like VH1 come ups when I was in my room as a child, when we had, cable and watching, I loved seeing women be in the industry and really change in a positive way, obviously, the music industry itself. Is there advice that you would give maybe yourself when you were first starting out music that you know now, or to women who are pursuing the music industry like yourself that you would like to share?
Yes, I'm so good at thinking of advice for my past self. I feel like that comes so easily. Like, you shouldn't have done that.
Oh my gosh. I'm sure you're perfect. It's okay.
Oh gosh, no. But yes, I think so many women, and this is not just in the music industry. I think this is just girlness, maybe. I don't know if girlness is a word, but
we'll make it one. Casually girlness.
We'll make it a word. Casually girlness. It's so easy to feel like you need to be small. Like you need to not take up too much space or ask for what you want or even want too much, right? Like, oh, that might be asking too much. I just want a little piece of that. I don't really want the whole thing, It's like it's okay for other people to have and want and desire, but it's not okay for you somehow. And I know on paper that doesn't really make any sense, but when we live out our daily lives, like that's how I was operating a lot of the time. And I think I still work on it like all the time. Like, am I living to my fullest potential? Am I asking for exactly what I want? Or am I just like, oh, I just want a little bit, and that goes for, pricing things and, just down to every little thing, because at least for me, I think I had been programmed to think that I should be happy with what I have. I should be grateful for what I have and not ask for too much. And that's really selfish and it's very self-centered. And so reworking that so that you realize that when you have more to give.
Yes.
That has been such a game changer for me. And it's okay for everyone to want exactly what they want. And if you want something, go ahead and want it to the max. It doesn't hurt anyone. It only harms yourself for not going for it. And I think it's when I realized, during this faith crisis, when I was making this record, that I had been living in a self-imposed box. And when that box went away, I was like, Well, if I can be anything, I want to be creative. Like I want this to be my living. I want this to be the thing I do every day. And I'm not going to beat myself up for wanting what I want. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to make it work. So that was a really long answer.
No.
But if I were going to tell someone, that would be the advice, is to allow yourself to dream and allow yourself to want the things that you want, because there's a reason that you want them. And if you work hard enough at it, then you'll achieve it.
Oh, no, that first of all was not a long answer. It was like the perfect amount. I feel like you hit every point, because I too struggle with that sometimes, where like I'm very easygoing, that sometimes it's almost to a fault, where I'll be like, oh, it's fine, it's good. And then, yeah, it's fine. Like, I feel like I say that all the time. Like, how many times am I going to say no worries until?
Because you don't want to be difficult, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to be labeled as being difficult to work with, or like, oh, you know, she's just, stick in the mud. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes I'm like, you know, I've had people remind me, like you just now, but just saying like, it is okay to make demands, and you're not being, you know, difficult. You're not being nasty. You're just being like, I just want more out of my life. And I feel the same way. Like, I love being a creative. I love, like, you know, talking to people who are creative. So I think that is so valuable to share. And that's one of the things I want to put on this podcast is, you know, giving a platform to words like you mentioned. So I really appreciate that. I always say it was so beautifully said, but it really was. It was really well done. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And it's something that I think a lot of women who listen to this podcast will struggle with. And so it's a good thing to feel how we talked about vulnerability and validation and redemption, that you mentioned that. But speaking of being a creative, we are showcasing at the end of the episode, we're going to play your song. It is called The Fall. Why don't you tell us a little bit? I love hearing the story behind the songs that we share on this podcast. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the story behind that song and why you wrote it?
Okay. So this song I wrote it was probably 2 years ago. Like I said, I wrote these songs a while ago. They're just coming out now. But I went back to my college town, and it was one of those experiences where, you know, everything sort of looks like it should look the same, but it didn't. Like all the same structures were sort of there, but it was like the malt shop was gone, and there were all these new car washes. And I mean, it felt like a different, I don't know. It just felt really different than like the college town that I remember walking around, you know, sort of pre-internet, pre-cell phones.
Yes.
And, but then I looked up at the mountains, and I went to school in Utah.
Oh, wow.
And there were all these, you know, like it was the beginning of the fall, and like the hillside was just like red, and all these like yellow trees lined. And those were the same trees. I remember they were small, and now they're like all grown up and big. And I was just remembering like how relationships change, and how time passes, and everything changes, except we're reminded continually of sorry.
Oh, that's okay. She's got something to say. So we'll ask them a question in a second. It's all good.
So yeah, I was reminiscing on like a relationship that I had in college, and how devastated I was over it, and how much I'm not anymore. And like how it's fine now, you know, but remembering sometimes takes you back, like a smell of a candle, you know, like, oh, you go back into that moment of remembering what you went through. And I like to relive moments, like even slightly painful ones, just to remember what it felt like. I don't know. I find that like valuable, even for just like 3.5 minutes.
Yes.
To go back to that and be like, wow, that was so profound. And then I come back to today, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of songs. They like, it's like a movie. It just like jets you out into that moment, and then the song ends and you're like, ah. So
yes, absolutely. Oh, that is exactly how I feel about music. And when I read I knew what you were going to kind of touch on, and I read the description of it. And I always think about that too, because I moved back to St. Louis where I went to school. And it's crazy because I live in the suburbs of St. Louis now, but I was always living in the city. So sometimes when we record here in the city, I understood what you were talking about because I'll drive by where my old apartment used to be, or where I first, when I first left college, where I went to live. And I, just remembering the songs that I would listen to at that time, remind you of who you dated and that apartment you lived in and what shop you went to. And it's just crazy. You're like, I remember I used to get wine here. And when there's certain places that closed that were a part of that journey that you were in, you're like, oh, I used to love it there. And now it's not there anymore. And it's sad, but life goes on and you're in a good place now too, but that was a part of your life then. So there's a lot of mixed emotions at the same time. So I thought it was really beautiful that you took that experience of your life or experiences that, created that song and put it into a creative platform like you did. I was about to say so I think that's beautiful. Is that kind of how you felt? You were like, I'm just going to put this in a song and see.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, there's a line in the song, when the mountains blush, I remember us. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why, when I looked up at the mountains, I was like, oh, it looks like it's blushing. And that line came to me and I was like, this is a song. So I made a song out of it.
I love it. I know. I was like, you are so poetic. And I'm like, is that how you felt too? I think I rambled on here for a second, but I really appreciate it. I think that's beautiful. Before we head out of here and play the song, The Fall, first of all, Angela, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate your time. So this was great.
Thank you for having me. So fun.
Of course. Before we leave, I'm going to have you promote yourself. But who was your little friend that was barking?
You want to meet him?
Yeah.
Baloo, come here. They want to meet you. This is my sheepadoodle. Come here.
A sheepadoodle? I've never heard of that. I'm excited.
Baloo, come on.
He might be
lazy.
That's okay. Oh my gosh, no problem. We showcase pets on the podcast sometimes, so. Oh,
do you see him?
Yeah, I saw a little corner. No worries. Hi, friend. How are you?
This is Baloo Bear.
Hi, Baloo Bear. Oh my gosh. If you're watching on YouTube, this dog is so cute. Casually Molly is known for casually showcasing pets. We've had cats. We've had dogs. Oh my gosh. How old is he?
He just turned 3. So he's finally not annoying.
That's okay. He's a beautiful animal. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I love it.
Boy.
Oh, well, it's so nice to meet you. You're so cute and fuzzy.
To meet you too.
I know it's so nice. It is nice to meet the both of you. So
I am fuzzy.
I'm like, he's so cute and fuzzy. You're like, nice to meet you too. It's all good. I love it. Well, that's right. You can write a song about that. It's just about confusion. Who are we speaking to? I mean, I don't even know where my head is sometime, Angela. But speaking of you, it's all good. Where can we find you on social media, any platforms, anything that you want to share with us?
Yes. So I'm on Instagram at Angela Soffe Music and Facebook too. Mm-hmm. I'm mostly on Instagram. I think things get shared to Facebook as well. And then I do have a newsletter that I'm told is entertaining.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I write it, so it's entertaining.
Okay.
I share funny stories. It's a little more personal, On Instagram, I don't know, they're like strangers on there, but if you want more, more personal stories, I share those on my my newsletter, and I give away all the freebies and stuff like that. And then if you want to get on the list for the new record and follow that, send me a DM if people want a custom song or anything like that.
Okay.
It's all in all the stuff I do. So you can look at my website and see everything.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure that we share Angela's website and social media links as well. So if you're listening on audio and you're like, where can I look at it? Just find it on at the Casually Molly podcast, which you just saw if you're on YouTube at the bottom of my square. So you did get into some squares, Angela. There's just two of us, though. So we didn't do a 4-piece band, but we got it to work. We made it happen. Okay. It's all good. She's like, I am just fine. The casuallymollypodcast.com. Just make sure that you casually subscribe, and just make sure that you casually subscribe to Angela's newsletter, because I'm probably going to casually do that after this. But as we're heading out, I always say, Angela, now that our episode is over, what are you going to casually do now?
I'm going to casually cut some vegetables because my kids are hungry.
Oh, yeah. Go feed your kids.
Is that what you were getting at?
Yeah.
Like what I'm going to do right now? That's what I'm going to do right now.
Oh, absolutely. People are always like, and mostly the time, like if we do it at night, like we are right now, they're like, I'm going to casually go eat something because I need to eat some dinner. So yeah, people have told me I'm casually going to the gym. I've had everything, but cutting vegetables sounds great. I've got a few peppers at home I should probably cut up. But what we are going to do now for people listening, we're going to casually play Angela's single, The Fall. So stay tuned, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a color on the hillside, happens at least one time. You uninvited in my mind. Cold fingers on the dashboard, you were moving over to keep me warm. I could have stayed that way for a while. When the mountains blush, I remember gold underneath our feet. Honey, it looks the same as it did that day. We fell into silence one last time, and I'm still trying to get you off my mind. I'm hearing summer's final call. Wish I didn't care at all about the monuments we left in town. I didn't mean a word I said, so I wrote a letter and never sent. You know, time heals, but it doesn't forget. When the mountains blood, I remember us turning leaves to gold underneath our feet. As it did that day, we fell into silence one last time, and I'm still trying to get you off my mind. You forgot me as you should, moving on, wish I could, but when I try to let you go, the weather remembers the fall. When the mountains blush, I remember us turning leaves to gold underneath our feet. Honey, it looks the same as it did that day. We fell into silence one last time, and I'm still trying to get you off my mind. But I'm still feeling the fall.